reveals something very different. I think it's significant that Paul says so-called brothers. Okay, now me and Jim and Roland, go back and forth a little bit about what that means. Okay, but for me, it's a pretty strong statement. I kind of take the position as those who are professing to be Christians. We can't judge and know who is the Lord's and who is not. Okay, but Jesus also said you'll know them by their fruit, wolves in sheep's clothing. And so when someone says, yeah, I believe and I put my trust in Jesus and so forth, and they say it, you can't discern, we don't have the ability to discern their heart until that kind of fruit shows up. When that kind of fruit shows up, these are those that are the most dangerous to the church of all. Those who say, I'm not a Christian, and they live a foul life and live immorally, they're not as much of a danger to those who say, I'm a believer, and I'm one of you, and they're going to church with you all the time and exhibit that behavior. Those are the ones that are the most dangerous. And so Paul refers to them here as the so-called. If you look at the actual word in the Greek, it literally means those who name themselves Christians. Mm-hmm. That's why the professing Christian, I think, is a very accurate term for it.
So you would say that in verse 5, when it says he will be saved, turn him over to Satan that he will be saved on the day the Lord returns.
Well, that's another
But maybe he's not actually saved.
That one, I believe, is also that speaks of salvation. In my case, because the word that's used there is sozo's, and virtually every place that word's used in the New Testament always refers to salvation, without exception. You would have to make that one case the exception, but when we talk about them tolerating this, and Paul keeps talking about them boasting. They're proud. Why are you boasting about this man? I don't think Paul was saying that they're boasting that, well, I'm not sure. I think what they were boasting about is how loving they think they were. I don't think that they saw that sin as acceptable. Okay? But however, what they did about it, in my mind, I picture them saying, well, God is love. And we love, and we're not like the other churches. We love this guy so much, we're not throwing him out on the street. We're going to try to rehabilitate him. We'll keep him among us, and we'll talk to him, and we'll try to get him to not do this and stuff, but we're not going to chuck him out in the street. That's unloving. We love more than the Christians in other churches that would have thrown him out. Okay, so we're working on him, okay? And Paul is saying, no, okay, you really love him, okay, this is what you do. And I'm going to hand him over to Satan that his flesh is destroyed so that he may be saved. If you really love him, that's what you would do, because what you're doing won't help him one iota, and it'll destroy you in the process. That's the dynamic that I believe is going on here. And so that's where but you look at that word and when it's used, and it's only used. When we're done, I'll just go through the list, and it's only used, like for example in the Acts, where it says, believe. An example, if you confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus Christ is Lord, you will be saved. Sozo's, and it's used in that way every time. So I do believe in this case it's speaking of, if you really want to be the loving Christians, here's how what you should do and be wise.
Well, I think it's clear I don't think we should be in a position to try to judge whether they're saved or lost. The point is, he professed to be a Christian, and he was living immorally.
And there's only one prescription.
And he was in the church. So I think that you don't have to. Paul doesn't try to let our judgment on the discipline be based on whether we think he was just a professing
correct
Christian and not really saved versus a professing Christian and you believe he was saved. In
Yeah.
either case, it's irrelevant. Paul says that he professed to be a believer, and he was in your midst, and you needed to put him out. So you don't need to try to judge whether he was saved or lost. That's pretty irrelevant. Somebody that professes to be a believer. The issue is if they profess to be a believer. So we deal with people that profess to be believers different than people that don't profess. It says in Peter, judgment first begin at the household of God. So I can get along and have great fellowship, not really fellowship in the Lord, but I can have, I can have a relationship with people that are not Christians that maybe are cohabiting with somebody or immoral or something like that. It says we can continue to associate with them. It says you'd have to go out of the world. So we can associate with non-believers that are immoral. We can associate people that don't put God first in their life that are non-Christians. Of course they won't. They're non-Christians. They're worshiping other gods. They're worshiping themselves or other religions. So it's a big different standard when it comes to believers. If you're going to say you're a believer, you've got to be holy. You can't be unrighteous. You can't be living immoral. You can't be cheating people. Or you shouldn't be, Christians shouldn't be associating with you. Even though many churches don't, like John said, that they're boasting, thinking, well, we're loving them. We'd never do that. And a lot of it relates, again, to even how they're brought up with their families and how they understand what real love is.
Right, and I didn't mean to, no, I completely concur with that. You can't judge the heart, but the combination of professing to be a believer with that behavior is absolutely toxic. And I think of you want to know that you will see the Lord's heart in this matter, where he stands, and there's an example in John 8, chapter 8, where you have the Pharisees, the professing religious leaders, okay, with all their ungodly behavior, and that is where Jesus dealt with them in the absolute harshest manner. Okay, not so when he was with the prostitutes and tax collectors and everyone else. He spent time with them, but boy, these Pharisees, he just starts off, you brood of vipers, and then goes into it. And
it's also important to realize in this portion that it's not a Christian who has committed immorality or has at some point in time had greed for something, or at one point in time has said something that was abusive or said something that was slanderous. But these are all nouns. This is really, really important because probably all of us have violated some of these areas. If you say, well, I've not committed fornication or something, but has there never been a time that you've not coveted for something? There probably has been. Has there never been a time that you've not said something that was undermining about somebody, that wasn't edifying or honoring of them, but was dishonoring? Well, that is slander, but that doesn't make you a slanderer. A slanderer needs to be put out of the church. Somebody that's cohabiting is an immoral person versus somebody who, I know some churches, in fact, some of the brethren that Paul and I were from, if they had even a one-night stand and were repentant, some of those groups would put them out. I don't believe this scripture teaches that. In fact, this fellow was living with his stepmother, and they were proud about it. All of these words in the Greek are nouns. So you may have, if that's the case, then virtually we'd all have to probably leave, because all of us at times, even if we haven't been immoral, at times we have, like I said, we've not used our tongue in a right way. We've been slanderous at some point in time, or gossip, or we've been greedy or coveted something. That is not how you put somebody out. It's a covetous person. It's a greedy person. It's the immoral person. It's the person that is a swindler. Maybe you stole something once. That doesn't put somebody out. But if you're a swindler, somebody, you tend to cheat people, that's a different story. However, Matthew 18 comes into effect with that. Let's say you did steal something once. Or let's say you did slander somebody once. You did sin in one area. Matthew 18 says, you go to them. And if they acknowledge it, you've restored them and your relationship has been restored. But if for one individual sin, you won't repent of that, it says take one or two more. If they won't hear one or two more, then you tell the whole fellowship. If they won't hear the whole fellowship or the whole church, then you put them out. You can put a person out of a church with one sin that's unrepentant. Why? Because one unrepentant sin, it says in this chapter, a little leaven leavens what? The whole body. If you have a sin that you're unrepentant of, any of us in this room, it will eventually affect everything about your life. Now look, I've sinned, you've sinned, we've all sinned. But I can tell you, by the grace of God, there is no sin that I'm conscious of, that I've ever done, that I'm not sorry for and I've not repented of. Not one. That's great. You can all have that conscience. Not one, ever. I'm sitting here today. I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I'm not saying that I've never sinned. But there's not one sin that I'm conscious of that I haven't gotten right and that I wasn't sorry for. You can't bring one to me. That's the way we all can be. That's the way we all should be. This is a very, this is a sobering chapter when you think about it. But you need to realize your life, it says, and we'll eventually get to chapter 11, where it says when we take this bread and we take this cup, and when we eat it and we drink it, then it says now we're saying we remember Jesus. In fact, in this context, that's why it says don't sin. Don't you realize Jesus died for your sin? He was the Passover lamb. He's using that to say how you should not tolerate sin, because sin cost his life. Sin cost the life of Jesus. And even though you may have eternal life, it will affect your life. 1 Corinthians 11, and we know whether this fellow was saved or not. We know some were saved in 1 Corinthians 11, and yet they died. Prematurely, they died. God killed the Christians in Corinth. He said, some of you are sick. Some of you are, first he said weak, then sick, and some have even died. Because you're not judging the body rightly. They were causing division. The sin there was division. I'll tell you, division is an atrocious thing. Many people, doctors today too, if you go to doctors, people that have anxiety, stress, guilt is one of the biggest things. It is so wonderful to not be conscious of any sin. Paul said that. We read that, didn't we, in 1 Corinthians 4. He said, I'm accused of all sorts of things. But he said, that doesn't bother me what people say about me. He said, I'm not conscious of anything in myself. It doesn't mean by that I'm acquitted. It doesn't mean that I might not be guilty of something, but I'm not conscious of anything. And when the Lord comes, he's going to bring praise to all of us because all my sins have been forgiven. It's really wonderful what 1 Corinthians 4 says. But here was a clear thing. This wasn't a one-night stand. This fellow was living there. But notice, there isn't one verse in this chapter directed to the man in sin. Hello.
Right.
Not one verse in this chapter was directed to the person in sin. It's directed to everyone else in the church. Not just the leader, everyone in that church. And so, if you know of a sin in your life that you've not repented of, it'll eventually affect your whole life. And if I know about it, and I don't come to you, it'll affect me. Many verses say that. Leviticus 19:17, to say the least, but verses in the New Testament as well. In fact, this verse right here says it, this portion. It says, a little leaven leavens what? The whole lump. You know this is wrong. You're to turn them over to Satan. You don't do that, you're going to be affected. You cannot say, well, that's their business, not mine. In the Old Testament, the reason they didn't have a police force is because the people enforced the law. The same principle we had originally in our country. Did you know there wasn't a police force until the end of the 20th century? The 19th century, excuse me. Until the end of the 19th century? There wasn't.
I remember police all over the place.
Yeah, there wasn't a police force until the end of the 19th century in this country. All of Israel never had a police force. Countries don't need it if they follow God's law, because all the people, just like the church. See, part of the reason we don't understand this is not only because of dysfunctional families having love, we don't understand it because we don't know the Old Testament. The people were to rise up and put, in fact, the last verse in this chapter is a quote from Deuteronomy. The people, if you don't put this one out, you will all be affected. So when you know of sin in your life, if you don't repent, it'll eventually affect your whole life. If you know of sin in any other believer, not non-believer, any other believer, and you don't go to him, that's going to affect your life. That's wonderful, isn't it? Now I've got a double protection. I see myself how I need to repent, and my goodness, I've just opened myself up to 1, 2, 3, you know, a lot of people here. Because if you see something in my life, I feel real safe. You'll go, hey, Jim, look, you need to cop kicking your wife or whatever you see me doing. Isn't that wonderful? Do you want that? Or no, I don't want anybody to look at me. Oh, you want your cancer to grow? You want to die in your sin? Do you want to be weak in your life physically? Do you want to be a sickly type person? Do you want to die prematurely? You better pray somebody loves you more than what most churches love one another. You better pray that people love you. Because love goes and shares with a person. It says in Proverbs, if you're rebuked, afterwards you'll be loved. It says in Proverbs, deceitful are the kisses of an enemy, but faithful are the wounds of a friend. What a wonderful verse. I remember a brother that was discipling me when I was much younger and how he was trying to build things into my life. And he was physically older than me, spiritually as older. I mean, I really looked up to him. And he said, Jim, after I was growing and had been with him a couple of years, he said, Jim, I'm not sure you really love me. I said, why is that, brother? I mean, I loved him as much as any brother. He said, you've never shared anything in my life. You've been with me for several years now. You've never said one thing. Look, you can't be with people. You can't be close with people without seeing needs. Can you? Impossible, because we're not perfect. The wise person receives correction and is wiser. The mocker rejects it. A verse that helped me, because my flesh, I don't want anybody to correct me. I don't like to be corrected in my flesh. So I had to memorize a verse to change my thinking. And it says, a wise reprover to a listening ear is a ring of gold and an ornament of silver. And I think of that. You remember in Christmas time, Zales Jeweler on TV? Remember Zales on Christmas time? They have this couple, they're going to get married, and there's kind of snow coming out, and it's dark outside, and they look in this glass window where the light is on, and they look at those wedding rings. Ever remember those Christmas things? Have you ever seen a Christmas commercial like that? Zales Jeweler. And it's dark, and it's this neat little couple. They're standing outside. They're looking inside the glass window at night, very late at night. He has his arm around her, and she them. And they're looking in, and they see this beautiful ring. They're dreaming of getting that ring. And that's what I think of. A wise reprover to a listening ear is like a ring of gold. So instead of me thinking, don't tell me that. Oh, no, come on, Moose. Come on, Paul. Come on, Winston. Bring it on. Because that's like a ring of gold to me. That's going to make me better. Do you want to improve or you want to just stay the way you are? See, that's what love is. We've not been brought up that way, many of us in our families. Or some of us have maybe tried, maybe we've not been real good and we've driven our sons or daughters off. Or maybe we never repented, and so we've driven ourselves off. In fact, Paul said to the church in Corinth, in 2 Corinthians, he said, you feel restrained because of me, because Paul was giving it to him. He says, you feel all like I've chained you up. I've restrained you. He said in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, he said, you've restrained yourself because of your lack of love for me. He said, you open wide to me, like children open wide to their father. In fact, we had that in the family book. One area of love is if you're open. A son, a daughter that is not open with their father doesn't love their father. In fact, they think their father is their slave. John 15, what does it say? Jesus said, I'm open with you. I tell you everything because I want you to be my friend and not a slave. A slave, you don't tell everything to a slave, but your friend, you tell things. I remember when I was wanting to build friendship with men back in Ames, where Gaius was. And when God showed me that, Jesus said, he said to his disciples, he's the master. If anybody, he is the master. He said, but I don't treat you like slaves. I treat you like friends because I tell you everything I know. He was open with them. That's what love is. Otherwise, I'm treating you like a slave, and I'm treating myself like your master if I'm not open with you. If I don't open up, if you don't open up with me. Openness is a real key in relationship. In fact, no husband-wife relationship is any closer than they are open with one another. If I have one compartment in my life that's closed off to my wife, that's a little compartment that I'm separated from my. If I have two, I'm separated a little more. If I have three, I'm separated a little more. If I have enough, there's a wall there, and I'm totally separated. And the ultimate is, of course, separation and divorce. Openness is the key. Brothers, sisters, we need to be open. There ought to be some that you're especially open with. If you've not experienced that with your parents, you need to pick one or two in this room, and you need to open up with them. You need to not have any walls. You need to, if you can't, see, if you don't have that relationship with anybody, you're in trouble. Satan's got you. You're alone. You're in trouble. You're not experiencing the joy of love. That's love. There's no wall with my wife. And frankly, there's no wall with any. I mean, somebody I'm not with as much as others. I mean, Roland, I have to see him every day, whether I like it or not. And, you know.
That's Jim being open with you right now.
And I see John pretty often. I'm seeing Gaius a lot these days. I mean, Gaius knows things about me I don't know about myself. If you're afraid to be open, you need to think about that. Something's in your life not right. Something in your life is not right. If you're not open with your father, your mother especially, and then from there it works its way out. Something in your life is not right. You want to be selfish. You want to be, there's something in your life that's not right. And I guarantee you that'll affect your future. Guarantee it. Look, I'm in my 60s now. I've seen this for generations. I guarantee you. You'll know it. So anyhow, and Paul said it right here. Think of what Paul said. Guys, if you don't put this guy out, it's going to affect every one of you, all the Christians. He didn't write this to the elders. In fact, he didn't even mention elders. He didn't even mention deacons. He didn't mention pastors. He said to the believers, all of you called in Christ Jesus, chapter 1. And the last two verses. I don't judge non-Christians. God's going to do that. But look at this. But yes, every one of you is responsible to judge anyone in the church that is in sin. The law commands, and this was a quote from the Old Testament, you must purge and remove evil from among you. There's a slew of verses in Deuteronomy that say that. I don't judge non-Christians. God will take care of them. So we say, and I know so many Christians, oh, don't judge. Don't judge. And so like John was saying earlier, really the people that say that usually have unrighteousness in their own life. And they don't want anybody to ever think that they're wrong in anything. But the Bible says if you don't judge in 1 Corinthians 11, which we'll eventually get to, you will be judged by God. So I would rather you judge me, brother and sister. I'd rather hear it from you that something that I could change, that I could get correct in. And of course, if somebody is unrepentant, in this case, let me just mention this too. This is a very interesting principle. Paul wrote this letter, and I don't know how many months it took to get it, on foot and boat and camel and what have you to get to him. But Matthew 18, let me just remind you, there's about a half a dozen places in the New Testament for discipline. And each one gives a different understanding. One of the first is in Matthew 18. Actually, Matthew 6 talks about going and getting reconciled with anybody that you've got. If you know somebody has something against you, you have the responsibility, it says, to go to them. In fact, look with me, and I think we ought to just look at this while we're on this subject. If you can turn to it, or I'll just turn to it, and you can, whoops, that isn't it. In Matthew 6, let's just quickly look at these so we can see.
Oh, man.
I know Gaius was wanting to look at these anyhow, weren't you, Gaius? He has been, okay.
It's up there.
Matthew chapter 6. Or is it Matthew 5? I made a mistake. It's in Matthew 5.
Uh-oh.
In Matthew 5, and look at verse 23. So if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly remember, see, underline that word remember. If it's in your mind, you remember. If you think about it, and you remember that someone has something against you. Verse 24. Leave your sacrifice there at the altar. And I just think that's incredible. God says, I don't want you to talk to me. I don't even want anything you do for me. You can't do any good things for me if you know anybody has anything against you. Let me repeat that. If you remember anybody has something against you, and you don't go to them, everything you do for God counts zero at that point. At that point, it's zero. Why? Because he said, leave your gift at the altar. He doesn't want your gift. Leave it there. And he says, go. Go. Leave me. Leave the altar. Leave your gift. Leave your sacrifice. Go and be reconciled to that person. You see, don't think it just matters with God, your relationship with God. Your relationship with God is totally intertwined with your relationship with one another. Totally entwined. You don't have a nice, happy, joyful relationship with God if you don't have a nice, happy, joyful relationship with believers. Guaranteed. I know this because this verse says so. This verse says so. Because God says, I don't want you to hang around. I don't want to be around you. Get out of here. Go get things right with that person. And in fact, he says it's a stench in my nostrils in the Old Testament, where there is disunities. Your gifts, he said, and your sacrifices, he said it's like a stench in my nostrils. Be reconciled to the person. Verse 24, then come. Notice that? Then come and offer your sacrifice to God. Wow, the power of that. Then come and offer your sacrifice. So you have that responsibility. And then we have in Matthew 18, Matthew 18, we'll look at, we'll read it in the New American, verse 15, the top of the page. If your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private. So now it's just the opposite. If somebody has something against you, you're to go to him and try to be reconciled. Say you're sorry if you can, if you felt you were wrong. If not, maybe they'll share with you. Maybe you'll see you were. Maybe they'll misunderstood. Whatever it is. On the other hand, maybe you know something against somebody else, and this is your responsibility. See, all this carries over from the Old Testament. This is why they didn't need a police force. Think of this, gang. We all have this I have the responsibility to go if I know anybody has something against me in this room, or any believers for that matter. And if you know where somebody's sinned or done something wrong, you have a responsibility to go to them. You say, well, I'm just a little girl. I can't go to them. I'm the youngest. This is for every believer. Paul said, don't let any man look down on your youthfulness. You want to grow up real quick? Obey this verse. Then, look, God has a double protection here. This person's supposed to go. This person's we got a double protection. This is how unity gets built. See, some of us, in our families, we never did this. Some of us Christians have never experienced anything like this in their lives. This is how we become one. This is how love grows. This is how unity comes. This is how holiness comes. Hebrews 12 says, without holiness, you can't see the Lord. So go privately, and if he listens to you, it says, you've won your brother. All right, that's great. If he doesn't, it doesn't say go a second time, a third time, a fourth time, just keep going, or just forget about it. It doesn't say that. You don't have that option. That's what, most don't go to the first time. The few that do go, if it doesn't get worked out, they just kind of get bitter and separate. Churches do this, people do this, marriages do this. You see, this relates to marriage. All these principles are relevant to marriage. They're relevant to families. They're relevant to church. They're really relevant even to business. But this specifically is the kingdom of God, the people of God. So if he doesn't listen to you, now you've got this verse again. All of these verses, none of them are for the guy that sins. They're all on us. Go. If he doesn't listen, it says go. You want him. But if not, take one or two more with you. So at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every fact may be confirmed. Great. If so, you want him. If not, if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the group, the church, the group, ecclesia, gathering. If he refuses to listen even to the church, the group, here he says, let him be to you as a Gentile, as a tax collector.